gets banned from the side of NIP, and I believe Pal, he's looked the most comfortable on this Silas.
He definitely has. As you were saying, a new addition to NIP where Dream was the hyped up prospect, not even last year, but even coming in as a starting role here, already feels like he's been replaced as he's benched out for the time being. We're going to have to see how Pout goes with his third series on the line against LNG, but furthermore into pick and bans, Kitty, you were talking a lot about supports and about bottom lanes. We mentioned the Varus already, but also remember that things like the Ashe in the LPL right now have been picked to fruition and have been taking over. Is it in Hung's wheelhouse, I guess is the only question to add on.
Look, I think Ashe and Varus is just an unbeatable lane just from the pure poke that you are able to exude in this early game. Sejuani is going to be the response as Xiaolongbao takes this Maokai, but when it comes to this jungle matchup, I feel like I prefer the Maokai a lot more, just from the pure damage that he is able to deal later on in the team fights where it's going to become impossible to contest anything. But back to this Ashe, it's still open and NIP can realistically deny it and flex it to either Photic or Zhuo, and we know that Zhuo does really enjoy his Ashe support as well, which does get locked in here.
Okay, so does get taken away again. Curious that LNG would pick up jungle here when the Maokai was already locked in, but still the option's been made. NIP, their AD carry, might have to get picked up there as well. Now, Kitty, already talking about other things left on board. For Photic, if this is going to be his AD carry picked up here, no, guess not. Forget that. Forget I even asked it because it's a priority in Ryze, right? And against Scout, I understand this completely.
Yep, I mean, that just means the entire ADC champion pool is going to get banned out by LNG. What do you realistically have left in this pool? Siva, I suppose Caitlyn is also a really good answer into Varus, but it really depends on his execution for Photic on how the laning phase goes. But Scout's going to respond with this Yone pick. I think Scout's entire champion pool has been really interesting. 7 unique champions so far, and his most played is the Ryze. With this Yone getting locked in, I'm gonna just assume Scout's gonna teach him why he's the OG player out of the two.
I already picked it up once, and again, it was one of Scout's best games. So, throwing the spanner in against Pout with the rhyming mid laners settled out for the time being. Let's look at those other solo lanes. Top is what, of course, we're talking about with the Gangplank already banned away, but Kitty, you alluded to the fact that there's no AD carry here on NIP. So I guess we should be expecting LNG to take one of those big picks away. I love that you already brought out the Siva there. You mentioned the Caitlyn too, which works so well with the range that Zhuo is able to provide. But they say, no, forget it. Let's just ban away those top laners against Invincible.
Yeah, Invincible has been the strongest player in NIP for their recent series so far, and I think that just targeting Invincible's champion pool like the Fiora, like the Renekton, where he's a very aggressive laner, is going to really limit the ability that Xiaolongbao is going to have on the map. But a blind Fiora is going to come out of Zika, absolute Giga Chad, eagling Invincible on this side, but I must say that although the Jax has been banned out, I think Invincible, he has that flexible champion pool where he was able to play something like the Camille as well.
Yeah, Camille's a really good answer, right? Again, skill matchup with the top lane. We'll have to see if it comes through, as this wouldn't answer all questions. We'd assume it's a Jhin AD carry. Of course, we have still seen Jhin support in the LPL, so we'll wait and see as Invincible's going to opt into more of the team fighting. Kitty, I'll be asking you about that composition in a second, because it feels like the identity is pretty straightforward. I just want to see what Hung picks, because he has left support to the last. And even with the Leona ban there as well. Yeah, you mentioned Heimerdinger. Any other engaged tools that we should be seeing?
I mean, Hung, he does love his engaged supports. Nautilus currently being hovered really good into Ashe because she does not have mobility, especially paired up with that Jhin. But Hysterics, I need to warn everyone that NIP has decided to lock in 3 AP champions in that top side. And I'm getting worried already because you're up against a Sejuani and Yone that can really just opt into those MR items, and you're going to struggle later on in the game.
That's a really good point, considering that, you know, we have drawn out AD, right, Kitty? Like, the Jhin is not constant DPS. We get a bit of burst early. The mid game is the biggest strength of Jhin, as we all know. Or on the other side, you talked about the Sejuani, the Yone being able to opt in as well. And Kitty, we have an engage tool like the Nautilus, which is going to be able to close the gap for LNG so easily into NIP2.
Yeah, a lot of
4-0, undefeated in series. The firm favorites running in But NIP running their new mid laner Pout once again. Let's see if it's going to be enough. Let's see if NIP can get a desperate win and rather an important one in the standings.
Yeah, Invincible, we already see that he has a lethal tempo available with the Doran's Blade start, so that's going to be an AD Kennen, which changes up things a lot for the side of NIP, especially when it comes to these team fights. So usually when you pick Kennen, of course, you do want to opt into a winning matchup in that top lane, so Fiora's going to get bullied out in those early stages, but yes, once again, once you get to those team fights, Kennen's not going to do a lot of damage when you're up against champions like Yone and Varus that do have the range. It's going to be a little bit tough for Invincible to pull off.
And again, that flash is going to be a summoner then based on that we're going to keep track of here is Kitty, lethal tempo on Kennen. Is that going to be an AD on hit Kennen then?
That is definitely going to be an AD on hit Kennen. Kennen. I believe, I can't remember who did this first, but the AD Kennen lost terribly.
Are you thinking about the Shy? Are you thinking about the Shy's rapid fire Kennen? Because we've all been there, and it was not great.
It wasn't great. I don't think I've ever seen an AD Kennen win in my entire life, but hopefully Invincible can change that statistic and win up against LNG.
Ooh. Ignite comes down, Dredge line there, as you said, Hung. You know, this is one of his fortes, but he does get punished pretty heavily for it, and Kitty, walk me through this 2v2 in the bottom lane, because already for LNG, the health trade just not going their way.
Yeah, I mean, Nautilus as a counter to this immobile bot lane of NIP, but no summoners spent for both Zhuo and Photic, so a really good trade overall. Even though Hung had to burn the Ignite, he is missing so much health compared to this Ashe where he doesn't have any health pots left. So I think in the upcoming 5 minutes, Hung really needs to commit to a 100-0 burst, or else you're just going to get consistently poked out by the Ashe support, which everyone knows that Ashe is a little pest in the current meta, and with that Halo Blaze in hand, it's just going to get worse from here.
A lot of CC added in, especially with Deadly Flourish too, so it'll be interesting to watch 2v2, but for now we're going to look towards mid as Pout hits Scout and kind of lets it all out. Now for Tarzan, he's kind of dreaming how he gets into this mid lane as Scout sets up the engage. Pout just hits back and Shalom Bao is there as well. Tarzan for the re-engage back on it, but Pout holds his ground and this Ryze doesn't burn a summoner in the process.
Shalom Bao's already pinging on the mini-map that he wants to invade the jungle of Tarzan. Blue buff looking like it's going to go into Shalom Bao's hand, but can Tarzan really make up for this invade by making something happen in this top side? Because NIP's bot lane, because of how the first level trade went, they have so much priority.
But Kitty, Invincible, speaking of priority, might be losing his. A flash in the making. Tarzan, is he going to commit his? Yes, he does. But Invincible still going through. Hang on. Zika thought he could get the kill, and that flash maybe makes the trade a little bit lopsided.
A 1-for-2 flash? We take that any day of the week, and you didn't even have to burn anything other than just your own flash, right? Zika maybe over-predicting that the stun could have come out earlier. Maybe a bit more damage from the Grasp Fiora, which is a bit of a, I guess, mechanical mistake, but overall, huge things coming out of NIP. Maokai does secure the blue buff where Tarzan wasn't able to venture more deep into the jungle of NIP because of how that gank went.
And so early game has been, you know, pretty reasonable here for NIP so far. And Kitty, we didn't get to talk about laning phase too much. I know you were mentioning that damage source was a little bit sided for the side of NIP with all the AP threats. Of course, AD Kennen is going to change that a little bit, but still against the composition that LNG have. It felt like you were telling me that the longer the game goes on, the less relevant those damage sources would be, and for NIP, the options would get slim, right? So then I feel like we're talking about how NIP use these level 6 marks and really get themselves going within the laning phase in the first couple of neutral objectives.
Yeah, NIP definitely just wants to survive the first 5 levels of this game. Once you get the Ashe ultimate and the Maokai ultimate online, these dragon objectives are gonna get so much easier to contest because you just have so many pull the trigger buttons, right? They're just very straightforward when it comes to a team fight. But on the side of LNG, I do want to highlight that this Yone for the mid lane, everyone's like, oh my god, it's full AD. But no, Yone does 60% AD damage and 40% AP damage. So he does make up for that lack of AP when it comes to these team fights. So do not worry, Twitch chat, I got you. Or maybe Scout's got you. But there might be something happening in this bot lane.
I think Tarzan's got you, Kitty. There's a double flash burn. But this time around, Photic is only going to get the 1-for-1 trade. So Hung with a good dredge line to set up, and Tarzan makes his presence known.
Look, once you get the flash offline Photic on this Jhin, Hung is just going to consistently hex splash on him, but Tarzan has been so active in the early game, he wants to look for something.
Woo! Fate is sealed though, Scout ulting in. What is it with LNG solo laners and just thinking they can find the full committal and nothing happening?
Scout just stood there for a good 5 seconds after his ultimate and he was just like, what did I just do? But a lot of aggression coming out of LNG's early game, but the execution just isn't there. And this is just really good stuff for the side of NIP because you want to avoid those early deaths.
Round 2. Well, Pout does have his flash available. Tarzan does not. It's going to be burned before Permafrost can be utilized, and Pout is just out of there. Well, Shalambao has already started up the Dragon here, but LNG are not stopping. Remember, Scout used that ulti, so I'm not sure about this play, because yet again, LNG are walking into the fray. Ignite's there. They're taking a 3 versus 4 before LP can get in. First blood goes over to NIP. It's traded off. It's a 2-for-1. Hung now in the middle as they look for Photic, but LNG, what are you doing? Like, this game so far has been messier than walking into McDonald's at 2 a.m. in the city of Sydney.
Look, they walked in for a Big Mac meal, but they received tiny chips. It's just not what they expected out of this early game, especially when you had the Nautilus, when you had the Sejuani paired up with the Yone. They were just lacking damage. Tarzan already half health from how the mid lane skirmish went. Hung went into Pout. Of course, Pout does fall out in the very end. LP had to commit a flash to really get that final kill, but with everyone dead already, there's just not enough damage to finish everyone off, and you're just a little Varus that is going to poke build, so you're not going to do too much with these orders.
That's just rough around the edges. I mean, yeah, LP was able to get a kill in the end, but look at the response. Xiaolongbao able to pick up those Ninja Tabis, and even though you talked about mid lane covering for some of the AP kitty, doesn't change back that the rest of the team is AD is going to be relevant in that sense as well. Ninja Tabi early with the Giant's Belt of Hell. Xiaolongbao is definitely in a great position where you can say now the bottom lane is too. I mean, Kitty, they got a kill each. And they're approaching that level 6 mark, which we talked about being so important for NIP to just make it to.
I just realized, apologies, LP is going the on-hit Varus build. When you are up against something like the Maokai and Kennen, you are just able to really shred their health when it comes to these team fights. But yeah, I think this is just all a snowball from how Xiaolongbao was able to invade early on in the game at level 4, and he was able to just get so much control in this bottom side jungle where Ashe and Jhin won the level 1 trade and they were able to rotate first. So LNG just realistically opted into a bad fight over a 3-for-1 trade, and it just was terrible because you're the ones that's supposed to be winning these early skirmishes.
And look, Kitty, it's hurt them so deep that now 2,000 gold down at 8 minutes, she's starting to think, like, what are LNG's options? Maybe I should be asking you to tell me what LNG move to from here, because it looks like they're going to try at least attempt to trade for the Herald, but with the early game now at that 6 point, with NIP now in a comfortable position, what do LNG need to do to kind of gain control back in this game?
Starting Herald here is really good. Although Hung hasn't gotten there just quite yet, he is arriving just now, but Ashe has the ultimate available while Hung is still level 5, so this is going to be really tough to contest. Like I said, Hysterics, once Maokai and Ashe has these ultimates online, objectives become insanely impossible to contest. But on the side of LNG, when we're talking about win cons, we have a Yone and Fiora this game. And what do they do best? Well, they split push. And I think when it comes to NIP's response to these split push, they don't really have a person that can really stop them from stop the split pushing from happening, because your Kennen's going AD, but it gets to a point where Fiora and Yone just kind of don't care about you since you don't do enough damage.
That's a really good point you put out. So, you know, stall out a little bit, get the split push going. I like it from LNG, considering that, you know, Scout has been doing that pretty much every series, every game so far. He's been the solid member of LNG, which is why this game is just so uncharacteristic. Not just from Scout, but the whole team. Decision-making hasn't been their biggest question so far. They have been quite tempered, and they've been pretty solid around how they play out their early games, where they don't panic. They don't kind of figure skate around and twirl about with no clue in the world. So I think the problem is here, getting the LNG, this is just such a rough start to the series, and I think probably their worst opening yet.
You know who has been twirling around like a little ballerina though? Xiaolongbao has had a great early game and he is getting his items online ASAP with those 4 kill participations. And I think Xiaolongbao has really had a glow up ever since Pout has been subbed in for these games, and that Invincible has become the more reliable solo laner where he was able to, well, he's been able to have a lot more freedom on the map.
And speaking of, are you about to see Xiaolongbao come in clutch? Pout moves in as well. Kitty, you're on the mark. Those two as a duo working perfectly together as Chain's Corruption used as a disengage. But LNG just going deep on the bottom side of the map. No priority really, and they pay for it with their life.
LNG's getting a little bit greedy with this early game. You already lost so much vision control, but they're going for more.
Well, Xiaolongbao is the one who's gotten greedy now. Space still beautiful from Scout. It might be Retribution, but Scout's committing so hard to get the shutdown. At least it's there, but meanwhile, NFP's bottom lane have joined into the fray, and Scout's going to be left after he goes back to his real body with a dead, whatever Yone is, dead spirit. It's 2-1-2 start from Pout.
He's already dead.
He's dead in the ground, Kitty. It was an attempt from LNG, but again, it's just questions upon questions.
Yeah, but very greedy red buff from Tarzan, but just with the amount of CC and global ultimates from the side of NIP, you can't escape once the Ashe arrow hits. Varus uses his ult to zone here, which I think could have been saved up for a later fight in this game, but Scout does find an angle where I believe he ults too, and it did look like a winning fight for LNG, but I just don't think Varus has gotten to the point where he does enough damage yet to really get rid of Pout and the Maokai in these team fights, because of course Pout is going the role of build and he's all health. So without these items available for the side of LNG, these team fights are just, they're opting into bad ones.
As you said, the on-hit, I think, really necessary to point out because lethality Varus may be a bit more impact in the fight, but the LP's got a bit of time that he needs to play with. As from that fight as well, Pout was able to pick up the Rod of Ages as we come back to live, and Herald is put down in the bottom lane. As this is turning into a dive real quick. LP not going to be hit by the Bramble, but instead Hung absorbs it up. Under turret, it's Pout who now tanks it through. Well done from NIP. The curtain call is layering up. Second, the third, the fourth. Oh, it almost hits with a deadly flourish aimed in the same location. A survival play from LP, but Kitty. NIP came for the turret and they're sticking around to finish off the job. And Tarzan under the turret going to ulti through Photic with the cleanse out in the nick of time, but they got the kill. They got the turret plating. It's still a net win for NIP.
LNG reinforcement was just too late to this bottom lane play, but does the arrow hit?
Oh, the deadly flourish does. No Dark Harvest because we don't have as many Chads in the league apparently. His LP's trying to charge up. He's got flash, but Photic going to narrowly avoid. Flash.
But yeah, now that you've mentioned that the Jhin doesn't have Dark Harvest, he is going the Kraken build, which we have seen surface in LPL quite recently, and that just means he's trying to do more damage in these teamfights with a lot more added movement speed when he does get his 4th shot. Gale Force, actually, never mind. I take back everything I just said. I do enjoy Kraken more. It's more exciting to watch, but Gale Force also works fine when you're up against champions like the Nautilus and Yone and Sejuani in these later game skirmishes.
It's so funny, Kitty, because like Kraken, we know, gives the bonus attack speed, and people kind of forget about the conversion. I think a lot of Twitch chat and people online are like, oh, this is so troll, but there is actually method behind the madness where the fast Jhin comes back in a big way. We have to pause Invincible getting close to a solo kill. And the reason is, Kitty, because I think LPL, they're mad scientists themselves, right? You know, a lot of the players here in the league love trying out new stuff. As we're not going to get a dive up in the top lane at the end, but you know, further onto the game, we got second dragon for NIP. Now, Photic's also going to get solo turret down the bottom lane. There's going to be first turret blood. So with that Gale Force, we are going to be pretty quick to a second item for this Jhin.
Yeah, a lot of Immortal Shield Bows and Mythics coming online for everyone around the map, but my main focus is how Hung is really going to play with his vision alongside the Sejuani and get picked. Because we've already seen the past 2 team fights. They've completely just lost from, I think, over-commitment, but someone just gets picked early on in the team fight and becomes a numbers disadvantage, and they just don't have the damage to finish anyone off. So I think with the amount of force that LNG's team comp has, with the Nautilus ultimate and of course the Glacial Prism, then just look for a pick similar to what NIP's been doing on your side this time.
Okay, I like that, because the pick as well comes through from the side lanes where we talked about Scout, Zika, being quite influential in that regard. Now, of course, they are behind in items, only just picking up Mythics quite recently here, with Divine Thunder being one of them for Zika on the Fiora. But Kitty, I want to point out, that if NIP are able to match numbers, if NIP are there for a response with the Ryze, with the Ashe arrow, even the curtain call, right? They've been able to use the range so well. They will have an item up, it feels like. Look at the Jhin again. Look at the fact that this Ryze is strong. And now look at Invincible as the flash comes through. Let's get that on hit. Kennen with an Immortal Shield Bow. A kill finally.
A lot of Immortal Shield Bows, Hysterics, but Hung just walked into the bottom side of this map when there are no objectives available, so I'm not really sure what Hung was trying to look for surrounding the Raptors. Tarzan, once again, I just don't feel that synergy coming out of the support and jungle of LNG for this game one.
True.
And all these early objectives are going into a scaling composition of NIP.
And again, you did talk about how, you know, for NIP as well, just getting to that 6 point and getting through the early phase was enough, but they are 5,000 gold ahead at the 16-minute mark. And even though Zika finally able to get the first turret here for LNG in the game, it's already matched by NIP, who've got 2 themselves. That gold lead still stands strong, with Pout going back now, probably into the Archangels, or at least close to. And Kitty with 2 dragons as well. We know that NIP are going to be able to force LNG around some of these early team fights, maybe more comfortably for them, rather than LNG's, how LNG would have wanted to play it.
Yeah, we've already seen the Maokai and Ashe combos going into these team fights, but I'm getting worried for the side of LNG because you have the Fiora and Yone scaling team win con, but look at the amount of force that NIP has. They have the Jhin ult, Ashe ult, where someone gets caught in that mid lane, they're 2 screens away, safely ulting you, and you're pretty much dead to nothing. Of course, we also have the Maokai available for these dragon fights as well, so I'm just wondering, can they really win these 5v5s?
Oh, well, Kitty, I think your answer's there. You know what? It's a quick no. A quick no. LNG have already lost their support. Hung is 0 and 4, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're right. LNG are not working the same together, and Shallenbao flashes on in. Tarzan with a quick response. It's a minute 30 till Dragon. And yes, this won't time up perfectly, but NIP, this is beautiful play. This is their best game yet going against LNG with their worst yet as well.
Yeah, once NIP gets the ball rolling in this early game, you don't see them slowing down. Tier 2 mid tower falling at the 17-minute mark. Dragon spawning in 1 minute, and honestly, the Dragon Soul being, I believe, Chem Tank as well. So it's just so many good things happening for NIP. This is the first time I've seen them have such a successful early game, and you haven't even gotten to the point where your carries are getting those 3 items online.
I like that you put up, you know, Chem Tank being good, because a lot of people consider this the worst Dragon, but for a Ryze, for a Maokai, it's actually not too bad. The survivability increase, the damage boost as well. When Maokai saplings can set up a rush and he can be at half HP, it is kind of good. So I'll be excited to watch this next play in 40 seconds, Kitty, because not only are we jousting NIP's ability to take this fight, but just look at the items. Get us the arrow. Was so close to hitting LP and getting that cleanse. Still, not a long cooldown here. And I was going to say Photic has a rapid fire cannon, so his ability to follow up got even better with Seraph's Embrace now finished with Pout. So Kitty, strong again for NIP with their item advantages.
I mean, you have a Fiora up against a Kennen. When it comes to this 5v5 sense, just think about it on paper. The Fiora isn't going to offer as much compared to a Kennen that has the flash available as well. But just look at the complete control that NIP has in this bottom side jungle, especially with your Ashe having the ultimate available very, very soon. And just LNG needs to just find a flank onto the carry since they're so immobile, or else they're not going to win a front 5v5 roll.
As you said, the flank there, but Zika is already caught out as Hung has the dredge line, got nowhere else to go. The Nature's Grasp flies through. Shallenbao might be dying here. An opportunity for LNG as they're taking out the jungler. They get the Dragon and the shutdown. A misstep from NIP. They're at least able to get Hung, but remember, LNG have traded evenly so far as Tarzan running for his life against the AD Kennen. His ulti already burned out, but now the on-hit ability is there. Zika just looking for the reset for the grand challenge. Doesn't find it. Snipe down the back end. Flash over from NIP. It looked dicey, but they still got what they came for, which was more blood of LNG dropping to the ground.
Although LNG denied the Dragon Soul point, but what does that mean? Pout 4-1. Photic 5-0. These carries are going to get ridiculously strong once we proceed later on into the game. Shallenbao does die first in this team comp. He did get focused down by everyone, especially with the Sejuani ult connecting in this team fight. Although Zika was constantly threatening the backline of NIP. He just doesn't offer too much compared to when everyone's so grouped up. Of course, Scout's ultimate misses as well. It's just terrible mechanics for this first game in the solo laners of LNG. I'm really sad, maybe it's just the rust. But yeah, Pao being so accelerated on this Ryze pick, he is just not dying and he's tossing out so much damage as well.
Kitty, I can't give over the rust, comment. I can't, because at the end of the day, LNG, there should be no rust here with Hung having to flash away, back off of the replay. Scout is someone who comes into the first game and looks really solid. Again, even if it's on Yone, if it's on Ryze, even Azir, Scout is that consistent player that you rely upon. And here in this game, again, we can only say negative things as NIP continue to lead the charge. 6,000 in the lead. Kitty was telling you before, this is what happened in the replay, by the way. Just another Ashe arrow calling out Hung and getting his flash. Kitty, you were calling out those items before we went through. We continue to talk about them as that Jhin's almost towards 3, but the Imperial Mandate has been picked up by Zhuo. And his arrows have been insane this game, and his volleys, setup, everything has been beautiful to watch, considering that he's got almost 100% kill participation in game 1.
Yeah, really good showing from the support of NIP, and I just really want to praise that they have been putting up a fight up against these super teams, but I can't hope just quite yet.
Well, maybe you might be able to. They're a little bit far away. Hung is once again going to be the target. I mean, the Bramble smash there, the Sapling too. Caliber takes him out of change, drops him only one man, but the TP in gives Scout another target. NIP have gone deep in a corridor, but Scout's not doing enough damage. He gets poked out in the end as Photic takes him down from range. A quick cleanse to get out of there, but meanwhile, Pout is just hitting it all out. It is a very mad world for this mid laner as he picks up a double and shows us why he's on the game instead of Dream.
Guys, I think Ryze is completely healthy for the game. 10 billion health and tossing out 10 billion damage. Awesome gameplay coming out of Pout. Of course, he had a really successful early game picking up those kills from the early dragon, but Hung just gets deleted before the fight even starts. This Ashe arrow even hits the Varus, so he wasn't able to really join the fight until later on. But Hung being so behind, he is just an ult bot at this point. It was looking pretty good for the side of LNG, but just look at where Pout is and what he's doing to the front line of LNG. He is just shredding them one by one, and no one's going to be able to kill Pout. LP even flashes forward, but he just doesn't have enough damage.
It's Photic. He's like, we gotta kill this Jhin. Nice snipe in the end, by the way. A real one-bong maneuver as we go back to live, and guess what? He's got another kill. 8-0 and 10. I was talking about the kill participation of Zhuo, but Photic just outdoes that here in game 1-2. Now with an Infinity Edge and Kitty. NIP, this is looking easy. It's against LNG, who have not taken a single series loss here in this split. NIP are 1-3, 1-4 at the moment. Like, they're not strong at all.
1-4.
Shalom going to get spotted out. Yeah, not great, right? We'll talk about it in a second. Scout gets the ulti, and that's going to be Pout caught out, and that was done by Scout. With a big shutdown going through, LNG now have an opportunity, but LP is caught as well. Once again, the combination of CC between the bottom lane of NIP stands out to be strong. But is it going to be enough from LNG to stop this Baron? Well, apparently not yet.
He killed Pout, and it does slow down their Baron taking ability, but can Tarzan really force something here now that the final Razor has finally fallen? He does have TP online in 20 seconds though, so you have
3K. Kitty, LPL flips, name something more iconic at 2K. They're holding on, they're being smart for the time being, not letting Tarzan in. They try and bait him in, but the twisted advance follows over the wall. Meanwhile, a Bramble smash would slow them all down with a Sproutling in the corner of our eye. The Jhin curtain call as well is going to fly through as LNG are now in a choke corridor, but Zika blocks out the charge, keeps Hung alive this time around. LNG lose the Baron, but it's NIP, I should be saying, who are getting everything.
Yeah, Tarzan does go in a little bit too slow to flip the Baron with a 50-50 smite, but like I was saying, NIP's team composition, you are just dying to whatever flying across the screen from 2 maps away. The Ashe ult comes out, the Jhin ult comes out, where the Jhin has his IE online now, so these ultimates are going to be so painful once you do get one to the face. So looking at this fourth dragon, still Dragon Soul point for the side of NIP, but now with the added pressure of Baron minions also pushing in the side lanes, it's going to be so tough for LNG. But yeah, Pout does get goal here by the Sejuani, all really good stuff for a beginner, but it's just not enough because you still have Photic and everyone else to worry about when it comes to these teamfights. And We saw a statistic, I believe. Maokai has, I believe, 13 wins up against Sejuani, where she's sitting on 9. And this is the exact reason, right? When it comes to these objective fighting, the Maokai ultimate just provides so much pressure. It's like 10 Sejuani ults.
And the damage as well that follows through, we've just seen from a single demonic embrace. It's so nuts as well as NIP are now pushing with this Baron buff, but guess who's been spotted on a ward? Zika as he looks for a flank. Also a sapling there to slow him down. They're trying to chase him down while also simultaneously setting up this bot lane push, looking towards power the mid lane kitty. It's like LNG just don't know what to do, or rather don't have any options anymore.
Zika is on a really wide flank on this Fiora.
They know he's there though, and as they turn back around, look, once again, Hung is going to die. Invincible with his ulti. He ain't AP, but it won't matter. The CC follow-up is beautiful as NIP rely on power yet again, as Photic has now found Zika. It's going to be blocked away as he's cleansed out the curtain call as well. Zika running for his life. My God, it's another and another. The fourth shot not connecting. But meanwhile, look at the base.
You know, Zika is denying that bottom lane away from continuing to push in. But there is another wave in this mid lane.
Ryze is at half health, but Ryze is, again, an AP tank. Oh God, you were spot on before.
He just called him tank with a bit of damage.
Yeah, but he has a lot of damage. I mean, he is, look, to be fair, he is 3 levels up on Scout. It has definitely been a bit of a pout dip in these team fights, so I think there's more to it, but definitely a nuisance at this point. As mid lane assault ends, the Baron used wisely, an inhibitor broken with a 3k Baron power play. The 26 minutes now, NIP can dot the I's, cross the T's, and form of that dragon in 3. And maybe the next Baron even coming up around that too.
Just looking at the bottom lane KDA of NIP is so satisfying. 0 deaths for both the Jhin and Ashe, and they have so many assists as well. Photic having a great game once again, 9-0, I believe, in his series up against OMG. He had that 15-0 Zeri game as a debut, but still, I think Photic is that person that you can rely on when it comes to these games, and he was able to carry even on a champion like Jhin, where it's not necessarily strong in the early game, but since the way NIP played these team fights, it does just put Photic so much further ahead.
And on Photic as well, remember that he was the player with PP God that 2v3'd so much last year. Like, they were a great duo, so losing PP God was a bit of a blow, but having Zhuo step in, it's been really solid so far. Again, Photic, as you said, he is quite solid, and it's strange for people to say who haven't been watching LPL last year, but it's definitely changed like that as LP dodging from the arrow again. Cleanse is available, but NIP on cooldown are trying to take away that summoner spell as they look for a pick yet again up in this top side. They'll continue to hang around while LNG are playing very defensive, but Photic, hang on a minute, kitty. You know what? Curse it. Yeah, we just cursed it. Oh my God, NIP have to get out for the
and Talon didn't get caught.
Talon wasn't there. Oh. Well, he's caught out too, and all of a sudden, NIP making some whoopsies.
I feel like there's an academy for LPL ADCs where there's this course that you have to go in and throw the game at least once, or else you're not a true LPL ADC, and it's kind of slipping through with Photic. We just praised his perfect KDA, and the Gale Force is in. Just take the Gale Force away from these ADCs. They're not trusted with this item. But you know, Photic does give an angle for LNG to come back into the game, picking up that gold onto the carries. Yeah, he does get a really nice Q, and that also hooks him into the Sejuani ult. And I believe everyone just took Taxi out with the Ryze's ultimate, leaving Xiaolongbao back, and he was caught as well.
Well, that gold given over. I didn't get to catch who it was at the end, but hey, for LNG, they're probably cheering at that small win. 45 seconds till Dragon, though, and one of those isn't going to be enough here. We are getting towards 3 items as LP has picked that up, rather, and looking towards Scout in the mid lane, still waiting to get towards either GA, or, well, I think it is going to be GA for 3rd item. So Kitty, items are coming through, but NIP are just still so much stronger in this game with their massive gold lead, and Chemtech Soul is on the cards in about 20 seconds time.
Dasher does not connect this time, but with the super minions constantly pressuring this mid lane priority, they're just not going to be able to find any vision alongside Hung, especially when he's so squishy and dies instantly. But Baron's also spawning at this current moment. So NIP realistically can just let go of the dragon and threaten the Baron on the other side of the map.
Or push down mid, as you were saying, use the pressure and just run it into the base. NIP with many options. Further to your point, LNG now cornered a little bit here, wondering what to do. Scout hitting up the mid wave as Soul is going to be the threat, but Zika has a mega blast cone to take. He can get over the flank, but the smite's going to come through and Shallenbao is secured. That's the Soul over to NIP as Hung sets up the engagement. That's immediately flash out. He just ain't tanky. Zika tries the grand challenge, but Photic goes into melee range, just doesn't care. This time I'm going to give him a Chad medal as Zika's followed up by Shallenbao. The CC, the zone is Realm War back with 2 spaces. Pout. That was big brain. He goes literally a centimeter and almost kills the Fiora. It's re-engaged. Possibility is there. Zhuo slowing down.
Alive.
And I hate Ryze as much as you do here, Kitty, because this Ryze could take down every single person. Pout lucky to not get Hung in the end, or rather, Hung is lucky to survive. But for how much longer? Flash? No, he's not. And Pout gets yet another with 5k damage in that fight. Soul going over. The Baron you talked about also being an easy possibility.
Zika was just constantly trying his best to become a pest for the backline of NIP. The arrow comes out once again. Doesn't
Tarzan is okay,
much.
just jumps over the wall. But Kitty, Baron just makes I guess another debut.
I mean, how are you even going to walk in? Maokai coming back up very, very soon. And you just have no vision at all for this Baron, where the Ryze is going to just consistently shred it alongside this Ashe and Jhin. They do get a mid lane tier 1 tower as a result of that though, but now you're dealing with a Baron buff NIP and the Chem Tank Soul also going towards that side of the team.
Well, it'll mean Elder will come through in 4.5 minutes, but that Baron, I mean, yeah, look, I was going to say, that's all you look forward to because the Baron might even just end the game. As Kitty, look at this again. A little bit too late for Tarzan to get in, and Smite goes over. Yeah,
Tarzan's been a bit slow on these 50-50 Smite flips, but Zika just constantly threatening Photic in this team fight. Really well played, honestly. He zoned this 4th shot as well, but just not enough damage to really kill Pout because he is just having the time of his life. So tanky, throwing a EQWER, something like that. And then he just gets out. He just has a free game for tonight. And Photic, of course, still having the ultimate available. Once he creates that space, he's just still threatening LNG, even though the fight is pretty much over. But they have to reset, and of course, the Baron does go into the hands of NIP. Now with the base open as well.
And speaking of over, it feels like it for a while here as NIP have clawed through LNG. It hasn't really been challenging. LNG since the early game had a lot of question marks as they ult into Shallenbao, but CC doesn't hold for long. He flashes over the wall. His ultimate's already been burned away. His Curtain Call now going to slow down LNG on their retreat. Running through mid, Invincible, that on-hit Kennen, that rather AD Kennen, is still a threat to be reckoned with. As LNG lose their inhibitor yet again, but NIP want something else at this base. They want that bottom lane turret, and now the setup begins yet again.
The wave is slowly pushing through this bottom lane, but the Elder Dragon is in 3 minutes, so can you really wait until those 3 minutes and stop NIP from taking over the entire base?
Enchanted Crystal Arrow off cooldown every single time we fight because it's only got about 30 seconds. As Hung misses here with the Dredge Lines, his 0-9 Nautilus hasn't been something to aspire to as Zika's already been forced out. Meanwhile, Scout has gone in just to die. Invincible now heading for his life. How many AD cannons are you going to get in solo queue? Well, at least over in China, it's going to be quite a few. As NIP are using this Baron to try and push in, try and end the game. And with Scout down with Nexus turrets easy to take, look at them go. Tarzan not as tanky as he'd like, especially at this point in the game, as the re-engage to try and defend the game. But look at the AoE. Kitty, just say it again. EQ, 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 EQ. Pout is hit from the back line and just won't be stopped. Look at him versus LP. He could miss 100 more spells and he wouldn't die. As the Realm Warp brings him in to see the Nexus loudly for NIP with a deserved win with 27 kills over the undefeated LNG.
A perfect game from the side of NIP, taking over the early game from just the bottom lane, and Shallenbao just creating all these fight angles where the bottom lane and of course Photic and I believe Pout was able to just flourish later on with these champions that they've been assigned. But of course, I just think this entire early game was executed really well from the side of NIP, especially with their champions like the Ashe and Jhin securing that early priority in bot lane, where Hung wasn't really able to do too much with this Nautilus. When you think about it on paper, a melee support or an engaged support up against two ranged champions, you want to force those fights in ball. You want to burn the splashes and work alongside your Sejuani, but we didn't see that for LNG for this first game.
And as you were saying, it was LNG's bottom lane that got out traded quite heavily early on, right? The Ashe being, I guess, as every LPL Ashe, every worldwide Ashe has been so far a pain to deal with. But that great level 1 trading you talked about in game really set them up for success. And then Xiaolong Bao, you talked about him being a ballet dancer because he was gliding across this map. He was the better jungler by far. Tarzan was making appearances, but Kitty, that flash, double flash topside, not finding much in mid lane, like 3 failed ganks in a row has got to hurt.
A lot of failed execution in terms of mechanics when it did come to those early game ganks, especially from the solo laners and Tarzan of LNG. But going back to Pal, I think this is his best performance so far we've seen in the LPL, only making his debut 2 series ago up against top esports. And him, as a note, I've always thought he was stable, but he wasn't explosive. But with this performance on the Ryze, he was just taking everyone by surprise.
And it was a takeaway from Scout as well. This was a pick that NIP obviously took away from, I think, one of the biggest Ryze players in LPL. I'd even say maybe in LPL history if you want to take away Doombee's Ryze. We've got Scout who picked up the Yone in response, but that Yone was either ulting, strangely enough, Kitty, where they've already disengaged, or Scout was then ulting, missing. Like, it just didn't come together. That's what is so crazy about this first game, is that LNG we looked as maybe a more slower, methodical team. After this game, I am a bit more questioning whether I assign that label or whether LNG have just had a decent run up until now. It is only one game, but still, this is a big cause of concern.
Yeah, it might just be a blip in the radar because of how Scout was performing on this Yone. I saw a lot of miscommunication, especially when it came to his ultimates. Like you said, they were fluking. And I just think usually the Tarzan and Scout we have, they dominate the early game and they play alongside Hung. That's why he's been finding so much success on these engaged supports, because they just look for these early, all the early vision in that bottom side jungle and they take over the map. But of course, this time it was missing. Probably just, you know, game 1 rust perhaps, but game 2 will show us a lot more when it comes to that.
Yeah, he's hoping again, maybe a change in draft for LNG, you know, going back to some of the basics, like priority on the Ryze might be coming through from LNG as well. So it'd be interesting to see the change in adaptation for a team that again has been really solid. But for NIP, you already talked out Pout. I think for Xiaolong Bao, again, really solid game from the jungler who is keeping this team together too, along with their bottom lane. But NIP with a game 1 win, that's only the beginning. Let's see if LNG can bounce back after the break.